Welcome back to Les Schwab Tire Center's Outdoor GPS, presented by Fisherman's Marine and Outdoor. Now it's time for your weekend tech tip, brought to you by Chevy Silverado.
It's time for the Chevy Silverado tech tip of the week, and no, it wasn't explaining how to utilize that auto setting in my 1-ton, which, by the way, do you have auto in your Chevy? Auto setting, like 4 high, 4 low, 2 high?
I don't have the auto setting. I have a 2017.
Okay, dude, I am telling you, that was the coolest feature in the snow and ice. I've never had a 1-ton or a 3/4 ton that had that before. It was like driving a Tahoe or a Suburban. In and out. It was,
you needed it this week.
Dude, it was ridiculous. Because you know how it is. You got to go from four high to 2 high so you don't twist your transfer case, you know, when you go from one surface to... It was just awesome. Anyway, that wasn't your tech tip yesterday. You may have thought so. But this is one that we've been thinking about for weeks. I'm kidding. Actually, literally minutes. Cameron made a point in the middle of our last break here just a minute or two ago about how to be a little bit more... Well, how would you explain it? When you were saying that, what kind of came across your mind to talk about depth and how to find it the right way?
So one thing, using a fixed float with not, we were talking about how like simple this rig is, but one thing about using a fixed float versus like a sliding float with like an egg weight or weight and then like, a little split shot and then your bead, is that you can detect the bottom very, very easily with a fixed float. When you only have the worm contacting or jig or whatever bait you're at on a fixed float contacting the bottom, it's registering very clearly on the fixed float.
Now.
And what the guys are going to do, especially this week with the higher water and fishing these inside seams, if you're going to the bank and you can't see the bottom, but you're guessing it's, probably less than 6 feet, because anything over 6 feet, it's kind of hard to cast the fixed float because you got to have 10 feet of line behind you.
Well, it all depends on who you are and what you got. But yes.
Right. 13-foot rods, we're good. Pennsylvania style now. But, but if you use the fixed float and you're running it along the bottom and you're not seeing any kind of bottom contact, because that's where the fish are going to be, they don't generally suspend too much, it's going to tell you right away. And you're going to be able to run your drift, deepen it 6 inches, run your drift, deepen it 6 inches. Oh, it's starting to detect, starting to hit the bottom. It's going to show that really quickly. Where the slide float setup, sometimes it kind of deadens it, having the extra leads hanging on underneath the bobber.
Yeah, where it might drag a little bit. You might not even know it, and that bobber doesn't actually register it for you.
So you can go to a spot that you can't see the bottom and really dissect exactly where you need to be running this bait, and then the second you start hitting the bottom, slide that float back up, 6 to 8 inches, and then you're just like dialed.
That was my next question. So when you're setting everything up, fixed float, slider, whatever it is, if you're running a bobber and jig, or even the setup here that you have, this is an 1/8 ounce, everyone, jig head with one of their addicted worms on there. Like you had mentioned earlier, you can actually go up to a 1/4 ounce if you wish to. It all depends on conditions and your personal preference. But when you actually make that decision and you know that your depth is, what would you call the perfect level to try, if you can, the height from the bottom? How far off the bottom do you want your jig or your jig head and worm?
8 inches to a foot. I mean, when you have the visibility kind of knocked down and knocked in, you want to be as close to their noses as you can. They're going to see that big presentation, but I still want to put it on them. If they're going to bite, I want them to react. It's coming right at them. I don't. Sometimes it's when the water gets really cold. They get lethargic. They don't really want to move. And sometimes when you're in these warming trends, they'll swim 10 feet and crush something. Right. When it's clear and they can see it, of course. But I want to put it on them. I want to make sure that that thing is drifting by steelhead where they're going to run like all the time. And the other thing, just to be fair, I have the 1/8 ounce jig on here, but when I'm using something this large for steelhead, I really don't see any like disadvantage to using the 1/4 ounce jig head. But when I tied this setup on this morning for you real quick, just to come in here because all my rods were loaded into my raft, I put an 1/8 ounce head. I would use a 1/4 ounce head because having a little extra lead there on something this large is not going to hurt you.
All it's going to do is actually help you get there faster so you can penetrate that water column and get right to where the fish are.
Absolutely. Put it in their face a lot quicker. It's going to detect the bottom a little more. We designed this this fixed float setup to where you have adjustable weights. So if it's weighting down, you can remove some of the little brass weights on the bottom of these.
So your float will react to what the current's doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can dial it in to where it's not sinking down too much or floating a little bit too high. So when a fish grabs it, it gives you a little longer of a time where that fish is going to hold on to that bait before it starts feeling something's going on and kick it out.
One of my favorite things about fishing a bobber and jig or a jig head and a worm setup is when your bobber does go down and you know that you're set up the way you're supposed to be. It's full-blown Bassmaster set the hook because I got a big old hook on there. I'm not fishing a bead. I don't have to go, it's whack. I love that. It's one of my favorite reasons why I love the bobber and jig setup. Okay, so there you go. There's your Chevy Silverado Tech Tip of the Week from Cameron Black. Find your depth, keep it where it needs to be. You should be more successful. All right, we're going to come back from this break. He's got a rod and reel setup over here that we've gotten questions on many times about how he likes to set up for what we've called chandeliering or suspending your baits when you're chasing steelhead. We'll be back with that in just a minute.
Outdoor GPS is brought to you by Yakima Bait, steeped in tradition, innovation, and fishing success. And by Procure Bait Sense, ruthlessly effective.